It's a great time to be a car enthusiast in 2021, or even just in the market for your new vehicle, because we've got choices. And I'm talking gasoline versus electric. Is it time to maybe hang up the dinosaur juice and move to electricity, or should you give electricity a few more years and go with a more conventional gasoline system? So what we have here are two pretty much identical cars, but they're unique in that, as we talked about, one is gasoline and one is a full electric vehicle. Let's start with the British racing green one to my right. This is called the Mini Cooper S JCW. JCW is the John Cooper Works trim of the Mini Cooper S, and as such, this is the performance version of Mini's little two-door hatchback. Under the hood is a turbocharged, direct injected four-cylinder, transversely mounted as Minis have always been. It's powering the front wheels via a 6-speed manual transmission. Imagine that, in 2021, you can still buy a 6-speed manual. Now this Island Blue Mini is quite a bit more unconventional. So a couple years ago, BMW launched the Cooper SE, E standing for electric, and what they did is they started with a standard Mini. They ripped out the gasoline powertrains and instead replaced them with electrical systems. So this one is powered by a 181 horsepower electric motor that makes 199 pound-feet of torque. That's mated to a direct drive transmission, so no gears to shift, and it still powers the front wheels as the Mini gods have intended. Now the batteries live underneath, kind of toward the rear, and as such it sits about 1 inch higher to accommodate the large battery pack. Still get all the same interior room though as the gasoline model. So how far does this go on a single charge? Well, the EPA says 114 miles. We found through our testing you can stretch that more to like 130 or 140 if you drive it nicely. But the cool thing about these electric cars is that if you have a place to plug them in at home, they're really convenient and cheap to use. So for example, we just plug this in, we go home at night, charge it up overnight, wake up with essentially a full tank. Now a full tank on the Mini Cooper S JCW, well, gas is getting quite expensive. If you run premium, figure probably well over $40. Of course, that'll get you 300 miles or so. A full charge on the Cooper SE, well, that's only going to cost you a couple of dollars depending on how much your electricity rates are at home. Charge times though, that's another story. On 110, this could take as much as a couple of days to fully charge. On a DC fast charger, 0 to 80% in about 35 minutes. Now, most folks at home are going to install a level 2 charger, which is basically your dryer outlet, and that'll take a few hours from empty to full. But if you're charging it overnight, who really cares? Now, comparatively, the gasoline car, of course, is only going to take a few minutes to fill up, which for a lot of folks is very familiar and is a big advantage. But another advantage for the electric one is there's not much to service on these EV cars. There are no spark plugs to change, no oil to change. Brakes last a long time because of regenerative braking. And in fact, the powertrain in this car is going on, what is that, 8 years old, 9 years old? So it's pretty darn sorted. I think that this one in the long term might even be more reliable than the 2-liter turbo. So behind the wheel of the gasoline Mini, and let me get something straight right off the bat, this car is properly quick. It's just a little 2-liter with 228 horsepower, but the car, even though many folks say it's gotten really big, it still is remarkably small and compact. And yeah, when you put your foot into it, it really takes off. And of course, being the JCW, this car handles like none other. It just grips the road. Steering is very direct, not quite as playful as some of the older Minis in the rear end coming around, but still is a very fun car to drive. So that's the good. The bad is that it's kind of soulless, unfortunately. Full disclosure, I've owned a ton of these Minis, and this latest generation, which debuted in 2013, called the F56, it just doesn't have much pizzazz as some of the older models. And these new direct injected 4-cylinders make all their torque really low, which is good for kind of passing, but when you get up high, it's not really zingy. And this car's got a lot of what they call rev hang, so going from shift to shift, it takes a long time for the revs to decay before you can actually rev match to the next gear, which is a real shame and kind of makes it frustrating to drive. Easy to drive as a beginner, but as a more advanced driver, it can be a little primitive. But if you still want a really fun car that just absolutely zips along, it's hard to beat a Cooper S JCW if you can afford the price tag. So on the inside, these cars are, well, pretty similar, a little bit different here and there. Now this is the John Cooper Works model, the sporty one, so it's got these very aggressive bucket seats. I'd almost say too aggressive for daily driving, especially if you are a larger Big Mac kind of individual. But if you are looking for your ultimate track sporty experience, this is definitely it. Now, it's important to realize that these Mini Coopers are kind of a hard thing to sell in America because they are like baby BMWs. They're very luxurious on the inside, they're very well assembled on the inside, but you do pay for it. So for example, this one has heated seats, got automatic climate control, the 8.8-inch display, all the materials feel super high class. This Nappa of the steering wheel is incredible. But this car has an MSRP of nearly $41,000. Now you're probably thinking, well, for $41K, I could get one heck of a Veloster N or a Golf GTI or even like a Golf R, and you are right. Yeah, the value is a hard sell on these cars, I'm not gonna lie. The interiors on these are better than all the vehicles I just mentioned, but from a performance or horsepower per dollar standpoint, those probably are better values. Now the Mini Cooper SE is a little bit less aggressive on the inside compared to the JCW because this car is more of a Cooper-esque competitor, which is like the slightly lower horsepower version of the gasoline car. As such, the seats are actually much better. And I just love this almost white denim material. It really looks great. Very good seats, very comfortable. The bolsters still do the cool stuff that they do on the JCW. Now the interior is almost identical. If you're looking at buying one of these cars, I strongly recommend the lighter interior. Obviously it's a little car and it really opens up the cabin. The silver accenting across the dash is very similar. Now this is a Signature Plus. It's missing a couple of options compared to that one. So for example, no wireless charging in the center, no heads-up display, which is a good thing because I hate their heads-up display, but it still has heated seats, automatic climate control. You still have the same level of quality, the same dual sunroofs. It really is quite nice in here. So pricing wise, this is where things get a little bit interesting. The Cooper SE starts at just under $30K. It's one of the most affordable electric cars on the market today. This one, with a bunch of options, including this cool tricolor roof, $37,000, which sounds like a lot of money for a vehicle that goes 114 miles. But once again, because it's an electric car, there are some benefits. For example, this car still qualifies for the federal tax credit, so you can get up to $7,500 back on your taxes on the federal side, and then of course you've got the state incentive. So in Colorado, for example, because our liability for the company is more than $7,500, we get the full federal and state. So this car quickly becomes more like a $26,000 or $27,000 car versus $37,000, and then it becomes much more attainable, which is kind of a cool thing. Time for the all-electric Mini, gonna plant it. Not much happens until about 35, and then it actually takes off pretty decently. Mini says 0 to 60 in 6.9 seconds. Now, it may not feel all that quick from a standstill, but once you're doing like 40, if you plant it, like it gives you a nice little shove in the back as you accelerate down the road, of course, completely silent. Now, there's a lot less drama than the gasoline, right? No gears to shift, there's no sport mode to engage with the exhaust or whatever. There is a sport mode though, which kind of sharpens up the steering and the throttle response. But this is still a very fun car to drive, and I actually think in a city setting, in some cases more fun to drive because you can really zip your way in and out of traffic and through small areas without having to wait for the turbo to spool or having to change gear. I think in a lot of ways this car is a better kind of replacement to the original Mini, which was intended to be an affordable car to take people around in and just happen to be fun. Now, $30,000 doesn't sound very affordable for starting, but when you factor in the tax credits, $20,000 or $25,000 already sounds a lot more affordable. And for the amount of fun you get, it's pretty good. It's really good. Now, it's not quite as sharp as a JCW, and you certainly feel the additional, I think it's like 600 pounds, but it's a lot of fun. It still is a ton of fun. From an exterior design standpoint, very similar, obviously different colors. This JCW has the red roof, which looks great, and then against the British Racing Green, it's got a good look. We also have dual exhaust, which has been a Cooper S trademark since 2002. Big diffuser along the back, and then up top, giant spoiler. Now, the Cooper SE's got a little bit of a weird thing going on down here with the wheels. These are meant to look like a British plug socket from the UK, which is why they're asymmetrical. People either really love them or really hate them, I'll tell you that much. But there are other wheel options. Still have the Union Jack taillights, still have a small spoiler up here, but then coming down to the bottom, no exhaust pipes whatsoever. So they've completely gotten rid of the exhaust pipes. They've made the Cooper S badge this kind of limey green, and then they put this electric badge on the back. And I think this is also optional depending on how you spec the Cooper SE. All right, so which one should you get? The gasoline or the electric version of the Mini Cooper? Is it time to go EV in 2021? Now, I can't convince you that 114 miles of range is enough, but it's enough, especially for a small car that's built to go in the city and maybe the occasional day trip. If you've got a place to charge it up at home, there's a good chance you're not driving over 100 miles each and every day, even on your longer commutes. So I kind of am leaning toward that electric Mini between the tax incentives, the instant torque, and instant acceleration. It's a lot of fun. Now, the gasoline Mini is still brilliant, but unfortunately the modern day engines, they've really lost some of the soul and the pizzazz of the old ones, so I say give the EV one a go. As always, this has been Tommy with the Fastlane Car. Check out TFLcar.com for the latest and greatest in EV versus gas reviews.